Hello, I'm Harold Munro, editor-in-chief at the Vancouver Sun and Province. Joining us is City Hall columnist Dan Fumano, back for another week. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Harold.
Hey. So back in the news, the topic you wrote about some time ago, developer Anthem is looking to delay amenities contributions, like no small dollar amount, $10 million in unpaid contributions. And it looks like the city staff are recommending that council approve that this week. What's going on?
Yeah, so we had written a story last summer that where Anthem was making this initial request. Anthem, they're one of the major developers in Vancouver, and they're building a high-end kind of luxury condo tower on West Georgia Street, kind of near the entrance to Granville, or near the entrance to Stanley Park. They had basically asked if they could delay the payment of these millions of dollars to the city, that basically as a condition of getting their building permits, they need to pay these millions of dollars to the city. And then basically these go to community infrastructure, like, they can go to things like community centers and parks and things like that for the neighborhood. But Anthem had asked to delay it last year. City Council unanimously approved that request. And at that time, when we reported on that first story, we spoke to some people in the development industry who said, this is kind of a sign of the challenging market that we're entering, and don't be surprised if this is not the last one. And then, sure enough, we did see a couple of similar sort of deferral requests from other developers, basically looking to delay, saying they're going to be delaying their projects. And these projects had sort of a window. I think it was a 2-year window when they were supposed to kind of move forward from getting approved to actually building. And they were essentially saying, it doesn't make sense for us to build in this environment right now. Like, we can't lose money. We're not willing or able to lose money by breaking ground at a time when the market's not there. So some other projects have been delayed. And in some cases, some of these projects are existing rental apartments. So at least they're providing housing in the meantime, but there's a plan to knock down the existing building and build a much bigger building. But in the case of this Anthem project, they basically, council approved the request last year, and then now Anthem is coming back and basically looking to delay this payment again, this $10 million payment. And the city staff report says that the developer has kind of advised them that the request is being made due to market uncertainty from interest rate increases, slow condo market sales and conditions, coupled with unprecedented increases in hard costs. So hard costs are things like construction materials, construction costs. So that's what the developer is saying, according to the city staff report that's going to council this week.
So are there common denominators between the three that you've seen now that have asked for delays? Are they all this same sort of high-end product, or is it a different types of products?
Yeah, they are all high-end downtown, sort of high luxury condos. I mean, for lack of a better word, like, I think the Anthem project, like, it describes it on its own website, describes it as luxury product, and I think it's fair to say these other ones, because of their location and just the pro formas needing to be there. One of them does have a rental component as well, because the West Group project, where there's an existing apartment building, West Group will knock it down and replace every existing apartment building with below market rentals, but then it's going to have a whole bunch of market housing as well. But the other thing that these all have in common is that they were approved under a somewhat unusual process that came with this 2-year kind of window, where the previous council approved it, and then they were supposed to get on with building within this 2-year window. A lot of things that get approved don't necessarily have that kind of deadline.
I see.
But these were approved during sort of kind of coming out of COVID recovery. Council was approving stuff, but with these time conditions. So that's the reason we're hearing about these delays, because these developers specifically need council's permission to delay these things, but to kind of keep the approval active. And then, the president of West Group spoke with us and just basically said, this project is stalled. It's just not viable for us to move forward in this environment. and they're not in the business of losing money, so they're just going to leave it as is. And as I say, that in that case, there is an existing apartment building, so they're operating it as rental housing for the time being. The probably, the longer delay is probably welcome news for the tenants who live there currently.
Right.
But it does
Well,
speak to
no,
this broader
yeah,
challenges in the market, I think, is what we're hearing.
right. And I think it's an important point you make there that these ones were subject to that 2-year deadline. And we know, and you've written about many other projects that have stalled or at least not proceeded apace for other reasons, but they're not necessarily coming before council in the same way.
Yeah, so we don't always hear about them, yeah,
Right.
in this way.
And I guess for a lot of readers, there would be a bit of a disconnect. Okay, on the one hand, we're being told there's not enough housing for people who want it. And then on the other hand, there's developers who say we can't build it because nobody wants it.
Well, I don't think the demand has gone away, but the market conditions are such that the cost of building is so high, and I guess the demand has softened for this specific type of high-end downtown condos. And I'm not sure if all of these, I can't remember offhand if all of these are strictly or strata. As I mentioned, the West Group one I know definitely does have a significant rental component, but I mean that's a major cost as well, right? Building brand new rental housing is expensive, and they don't recapture, the builders don't recapture that investment very quickly. It takes a very long time before you make your money
Right.
back off of building new rental housing, especially if there's a sort of below market component, which is the case, I think, with this one. So it's yeah, it's this thing. I think it's very expensive and difficult to build. There's also labor market constraints. You talk to everybody in the building industry, it's there's a real tight labor market. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, it does seem
So
like
then what's
I mean, what we're
yeah,
hearing at least is that there is still a demand for housing, but maybe the demand has softened for this specific kind of high-end downtown condos.
right,
Um,
right. So what does that mean for, it's not downtown, but it's certainly a lot of condos planned along the Broadway corridor. Um, is there concern about how that might progress?
well, I mean, we'll have to do sort of a look at what is planned, but I mean, the Broadway plan specifically was designed to put an emphasis on rental, purpose-built rental housing, and at
Right,
least a lot of the early developments that we've seen come through are that they're focused on rental, and so developers are having certainly no problem filling up rental housing. They build an apartment building, it's going to be tenanted very quickly. Now, it can be challenging to make the numbers work, especially because a lot of these pro buildings proposed along the Broadway corridor have a 20% below market, like 20% of the units are held at below market rates. So that can
right.
be difficult to make
To
the
house the
numbers
people
work
that are being displaced by all the, there's a
in,
partly to house people that are being displaced
yeah,
along the
in many
corridor.
cases. But most of
Yeah,
these proposals that have come through, these early proposals, aren't actually displacing any existing tenants, because I mean, that was the city's goal.
right.
So you have like
Yeah,
major developments that's underway right now at the corner of Broadway and Granville. PCI is building a really big, tall apartment building that's going to have offices and a grocery store and stuff as well, and that's replacing a former bank building. Then you have the former Mountain Equipment Co-op building. There's two huge towers being proposed for there. Again, no displacement of existing tenants. And then there's some other big buildings along Main Street. Again, they're not displacing any renters. So there will, I mean, it's expected there will be some displacement of tenants, but a lot of these big buildings that are being considered early on are replacing commercial properties. The
right,
former Denny's site. So they are, the idea is that they'll have an inventory of hundreds of new rental buildings that aren't displacing any existing people. So it's a net gain, unlike, a situation like Metrotown in Burnaby, where they demolished lots and lots of older affordable apartment buildings to replace them with new condo buildings that were not affordable. So you had a net gain in housing units, but a net loss in rental housing, and definitely a major net loss in affordable kind of units. That's what the city's trying to avoid with the Broadway plan. And you talk to people in City Hall, the former council who approved the Broadway plan, and they were kind of mindful of the example of Metrotown, which is what they did not want. Obviously, it remains to be seen if that will be successful or not.
Okay. All right. So shifting gears finally over to Mayor Ken Sim, the Integrity Commissioner found last week that he had acted in a discriminatory manner when he prevented one of the park board commissioners from, I guess, virtually attending a meeting that he had called, and she was home with a newborn. And yeah, anyway, so tell us about what's going on there and what it means.
Yeah, basically, I mean, this complaint was filed by a member of the public. So complaints can be filed by other politicians, which we've seen a couple of times. Uh, Mayor Sim himself has filed a couple of complaints so far against Christine Boyle, a councillor who represents one city, a different political party from the mayor's. But in this case, this was a complaint filed by a member of the public. I don't actually know if this member of the public has any affiliation with a political party, um, but they were just identified in the complaint as a member of the public who cited a story that we wrote in the Vancouver Sun and Province that basically the week of the big news last December, the week of the big announcement when Ken Sim came out and said he was planning to abolish the city's elected park board, we sort of tried to do a TikTok where we tried to figure out who knew what when and how the decision kind of was conveyed to different people. And as part of that, we reported on this meeting where the elected park board commissioners, at least the ones affiliated with the mayor's ABC party, they were called to City Hall. The mayor advised them of his plan to have a press conference the next day where he was going to announce this news. And that was the meeting that one of the park board commissioners had wanted to phone in. As you say, she was at home with a 1 month old infant, and she was prevented from being able to phone in. And the reason given to the integrity commissioner by the mayor said she couldn't phone in because everybody present at the meeting had to sign these non-disclosure agreements saying that they wouldn't say anything about the contents of the meeting to anyone until after the next day's press conference had happened. So yeah, that's what we reported in the story that ran back in December. What we reported in the story wasn't disputed by anyone that I'm aware of. And someone read that and cited our story in their complaint to the investigation commissioner and said, we read this in the Vancouver Sun. And I think they actually made two complaints. They said that they alleged that this was constituted an illegal meeting because it was not open. They had a quorum of park board commissioners there present, but it was not an open meeting, which is illegal. The complainant alleged, and then they alleged that it was discriminatory because this new mother was barred from participating in the meeting, and not given a reasonable chance to participate. The commissioner found that it was not an illegal meeting, so she sort of dismissed that part of the complaint, basically because saying, yes, it is true there was a quorum of park board commissioners there, but they weren't discussing any park board decision, right? They were discussing the mayor was about to announce what was going to be a decision of council, right? The mayor was going to introduce a motion that council was going to vote on,
Right.
but it wasn't a decision of park board anyway. So the mayor said, sorry, the commissioner found that was not an issue.
Right.
But she did find that basically the mayor had and his staff had created a discriminatory work environment by not providing a reasonable accommodation for this new mother to participate. She's an elected official, and she's a new mother, and there could have been a reasonable way to figure out to get her to participate, considering how serious the content of the meeting was. It wasn't just some run of the mill thing. It was obviously a very major development.
Right.
And it's important to note the mayor said there was no evidence to show that there was no deliberate or intentional bias. The mayor had provided evidence that suggests that, he has a commitment to inclusion and diversity and human rights. And so the commissioner found that, but said it's well established within human rights law that intent is not required for a finding of discrimination. So the mayor was recommended that the mayor should apologize to the commissioner, and we were told that he did so last week. He phoned uh, the commissioner Christensen herself and apologized. And yeah.
Right. Okay. So the bigger issue at play here, I mean, in terms of the park board, is we know that that the mayor wants it disbanded. He's asked the province to, because he can't do it on his own, right? He's asked for
Yeah.
legislative change to. There's no indication, as far as I can tell, that the province is going to deal with that during this short legislative session. And then there is no plan for the legislature to sit between now and the election. So in October, provincial election. So are we stuck with this basically toothless park board? Uh,
Well, I mean, they're still making decisions and having meetings and voting on things in the meantime. The mayor's staff, and the mayor and his, chief of staff have said, publicly that they are still confident that this is going to get approved and happen during this spring session. Other people, commentators have expressed skepticism at that. And, even the premier, when asked about this a few weeks ago, Premier Eby said something to the effect of, I know that this park board thing is on a lot of people's mind in Vancouver, but it's not necessarily the top priority for the provincial government in Victoria. They obviously have a very packed, as you mentioned, they've got a very packed agenda. They've got a short session and an election coming up in the fall. And so the
Politically,
premier
it
seemed
makes
to suggest it wasn't.
there's zero advantage politically on the eve of an election for the province to weigh in on this one, I would imagine.
One might imagine, but I mean, even after the premier's most recent comments, the mayor and his staff, when I spoke with them, they are still very confident. They said, if you look at Eby's comments, he said it's not necessarily a number one priority, but we are looking forward to seeing what the city provides to us, in terms of this transition plan. And so yeah, the mayor's office, at least as of the last time I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, was expressing confidence that this will still happen in the spring. Other people are maybe a bit more skeptical about the
Okay. And
timing.
if it doesn't happen, then basically he gave up control of the ABC control of the park board for a year at least before this is going to get dealt with, or
Yeah,
I guess the better part of a year, anyways.
yeah. I mean, who knows what could happen timing wise, but yeah, effectively, ABC has gone from controlling 6 out of the 7 positions on the park board. And now, after the mayor's announcement in December, obviously with 3 ABC commissioners leaving to sit as independents, ABC is now only representing 3 out of 7 seats on the park board. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll know soon enough whether the province is going to weigh in this term. So we'll look forward to that. All right, Dan, have a great week and we'll talk to you
Great.
next Monday.
Great. Thanks, Harold. Talk to you soon.